often get asked, like, who's my most favorite or most famous person you've ever interviewed. You get that, I'm sure, Amy.
Oh, yeah. Who do you say?
Um,
Gosh, 'cause there's a lot.
I'd say Elie Wiesel. And it was when I was back at WLS that happened. But Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate who wrote Night about his time in a concentration camp during World War II.
Did he come into the station there?
No, he was living in Florida at the time. He's a retired academic. I mean, that book, Night, I don't know if it's still required reading in the high school level, even grade school. Should be.
I know they read the boy in the striped pajamas.
Elisha Wiesel has an op-ed in USA Today. Son. It was freshman year. I was home for a holiday weekend, and the nation was awaiting the outcome of the Supreme Court case that was the talk of the campus. Over dinner, I shared my views. The right to burn the flag, I told my parents with 18-year-old certainty, is a far more beautiful thing than the flag itself. We should be inspired when we see the flag being burned because it means we are free. He goes on to write, I can count on one hand the number of times I saw my father angry. It's the only time I can remember him being angry at me. My father's face darkened as he pushed back his chair and stood up from the table. If you had been there, he said in a voice I'd never heard him use before, if you had been there when Buchenwald was liberated, if you had seen that flag being carried that day, Dad, if you knew what that flag meant to the soldiers who had seen their brothers killed trying to reach us, if you knew what that flag meant to me then and means to me now, you would never utter such foolishness at my table. Elisha Wiesel says, I was ashamed. My obsession with one truth, that civil liberties were a treasure to be protected, have prevented me from saying a truth that stood just as strongly beside it. Not everything that is legal is right. Not everything that can be said should. My parents had endured unspeakable horrors to arrive at this promised, if imperfect land, to make common cause with their most deeply held beliefs. I had been not only ungrateful, but blind. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree here in terms of the quality of the thinking from Elisha Wiesel. And the point he makes is that, yeah, these arguments about can these model Hamas protesters, these ignoramuses, can they spew their nonsense? Should they be able to? Generally speaking, sure. But that's not the point. The point is, what's the job of a university? What's the job of a university in these moments? And parents, these kids at the university, for that matter, too. That's the point he picks up on, and I think it's excellent. Our enemies accuse us of colonizing Palestine. We're the professors of history who have studied the archaeological and written records, which include the New Testament and the Quran, that connect the ancient Jews to Israel. Why are they silent? Our enemies insist that Jews do not need their own nation. We're the faculty who should be pointing out that when European Jewry needed shelter from the Nazis, no other nation would offer them refuge. Our enemies accuse Israel of genocide. Where are the history lessons on the blood libel, the historical precedent for accusing Jews of murder, on the repeated Palestinian rejection of Israel's offers of self-rule, land, and peace that dispel this genocide lie completely? On the actual definition of genocide? And he just concludes by saying it's time for university leaders to do their job. It's time for them to teach. Well, unfortunately, there's not too many Elie Wiesels on college campuses these days, or even Elisha Wiesel. And, oh, by the way, those who are there, students and faculty alike, are being funded by leftist billionaires, including the family of our very own Governor Jelly Belly. This from Politico. Donors to these groups on campus, these model Hamas protesters, include some of the biggest names in Dem circles: Soros, Rockefeller, Pritzker. Yeah.
Nicholas Pritzker.
Mm-hmm. Nick Pritzker and his wife Susan $6,600 to the Biden Victory Fund, more than $300,000 in the 2020 campaign, of course, so on and so forth. But they're also the Rockefellers too, but funding organizations like the Tides Foundation. Another one in Illinois, in Glen Carbon, called the Adala Justice Project, from their website. Though this is the Tides Foundation funds the Adala Project. You know, you fund the clearinghouse to fund all of these organizations at the grass tops and grassroots. The Adala Justice Project, Glen Carbon, Illinois, seeks to shift American attitudes and policy concerning Israel-Palestine towards a human rights approach that guarantees historic justice and equality for Palestinians, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's all the sort of the sanitized language that turns into brick by brick, wall by wall, Israel will fall chants on college campuses. You know, one of the things in terms of infrastructure on the center right, you have this ridiculous Southern Poverty Law Center, which is just a front group for Dems to use as a ombudsman for the media, to have somebody to reference when they call anybody they disagree with an extremist. This is an extremist group. That's an extremist group, Southern Poverty Law Center. Completely corrupt organization. But where are the similar calls and questions about the funders of organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine, these campus chapters, and other such nonprofits who are engaged in, dubious conduct at best? For more on all of this, including the state of affairs with the call to clear out of Rafah, apparently the offensive in Rafah is coming. Stephen Bucci served in America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. He's a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. Though I have to tell you, you've laid a pretty tough road for me, having to come after that op-ed you read. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful op-ed. People should read it. I'll certainly tweet it out. And the lineage of Alicia Wiesel too. I mean, it's a reminder, and it's thoughtful, and it's asks all the right questions. We don't get that as much as we should, obviously. But what about that? And not just the university, what the job the university should be doing and they're not doing is sort of a political and funding question. What about these organizations funded by these billionaire potentates of the left? And perhaps in a different administration, more and at the state and local level, more scrutiny in terms of exactly the kinds of activities they're engaged in. Just like we talk about, like the Confucius centers on college campuses, that becomes potentially, if not a national security issue, at least a law enforcement issue with some of these questionable activities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to the point where most of those same organizations are the ones who fund these very liberal district attorneys, so that when these people that same organization has funded go out and destroy things and violate other people's rights, they get booked, then they release them, the records get expunged, because those are not really crimes. That's just their right to do that. But if the other side does exactly the same level of activity, they're thrown in jail and left there. So this is not all random. This is not just stuff where somebody gave money and then that organization happened to do something. This is all planned. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but I have to tell you, when you sit and watch it and look at it in its totality, it's just unbelievable that the mainstream press does not ever point any of this out, which just tells you they're complicit with it. And that's just, it's sad for our country.
Well, what do you think of these encampments? I mean, there's different rules for different campuses. Here in Chicago, the Art Institute, they set up a camp. That was knocked down immediately, 68 protesters arrested. But still, at DePaul University and at University of Chicago, they're letting them stay. There's no talk. There was talk of last night possibly clearing out University of Chicago, but they stood down and they're letting them stay there. So what message does that send to the rest of the world?
Well, it's probably a harbinger that you guys are going to have a pretty sporty time when the Democratic convention comes into town.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a problem for you if that's the message that your leadership is sending. There'll be a ton of people there because they know they're going to get away with it.
Although we have seen some encouraging notes, too. I mean, there was pushback at the University of Chicago's campus like there was in North Carolina, like there was at Ole Miss, like there was at LSU. So there are, and from the students, I mean, too. So you don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There are some sensible young people out there as well. But it's a problem. Speaking of just the larger geopolitical issue. So over the weekend, there were reports that dozens of rockets were fired from Lebanon toward Israel. This ostensibly the handiwork of Hezbollah, one of the many Islamist terrorist organizations being celebrated by some on these college campuses, shockingly enough. What's your handle on where things stand currently with respect to Israel's offensive to try to eradicate as much of Hamas's capacity as possible, combined with, all of the collaborators essentially with Hamas trying to do their bidding in the face of it?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I don't think Israel is going to be bent one way or another in a major way to stop this offensive. It doesn't. Blinken can talk to them only once. When Netanyahu decides this is the moment we're going to go into Rafah, they're going, and they're trying their best to accommodate the people clutching their pearls and swooning over the fact that when you attack a sovereign country the way that Hamas did on October 7th, that they might actually retaliate, and in this case, Israel's patience is gone. And they are now going to move in. Now they're warning them, which we don't normally do in war. You don't tell the enemy when you're coming. You don't tell them where you're coming. But Israel obviously has to play by different rules. At least that's what the world leaders seem to think. But they're going to go and they're going to get them. But think about it. The United States pushed Israel to open this other crossing site so more humanitarian aid could get in. Israel said, look, there's plenty of aid getting in there. It's just that Hamas is stealing it. Oh, no, there's a famine. Just listen to the UN. And what does Hamas do? They, from inside Gaza, from inside the Rafah area, they start rocketing that crossing site and kill several Israeli soldiers and a bunch of civilians, most of them Palestinians. And then people say, well, gee, Israel just needs to negotiate with Hamas. They'll give them what they want. They'll be fine. Look, Hamas doesn't want anything other than the destruction of Israel and to kill and maim as many Israelis as possible. They are not good faith negotiation partners. And for Blinken and Biden and the crowd continuing to push Israel to negotiate with these terrorists is ludicrous. And this weekend was another example of them not caring about aid coming in. They're perfectly happy shutting that off because it gives them propaganda points. But they are the detriment to people getting any aid that they think they need, not Israel. Israel's doing what it can do. This is the first war I've ever seen, and I've studied from back in the beginning all the way through. I've never seen a war where the side that was attacked to start the war is suddenly responsible for all of the food and medical and everything else of the people who just attacked them. But that's what Israel is facing right now.
Well, and the other matter, too, that this open sort of contemplation of whether or not we, being the United States, will accept refugees from Gaza. And this comes on the heels of something on the order of 5 dozen Muslim majority countries saying, no thanks, not going to happen. So we're the refugee provider of first and maybe last resort, at least with respect to the Biden administration's apparent posture. And this becomes problematic. We have to have a difficult conversation, and not because I'm intimidated by these Philistines on college campuses, but because, Gaza elected Hamas. And we have previous historical examples of not every Palestinian, but a lot of Palestinians being very sympathetic to terrorist organizations, celebrating in the streets in Gaza when those planes flew into the Twin Towers on 9/11, celebrating Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait and our involvement in Gulf War I, so much so that Kuwait deported some 300,000 Palestinians after it was liberated by the United States. So, in masse, refugees from Gaza doing it en masse is problematic, not just from an economic point of view, but also from a national security point of view.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at our record in the past, taking people from these, particularly the Middle Eastern countries, we are abysmal at vetting them and having any assurance that these people are just, poor folks who fell into bad times and need a new home. There's been bunches of them that have come over and either politically, like Ilhan Omar, or actively have been operating against the interests of the United States. And now you're going to take the most radicalized group of Arabs in the Middle East against Israel and against the United States at a time when anti-Semitism here is going up, and you're going to bring in thousands of those folks as refugees and put them where? All in one place, so they get another member of Congress that's like
Tlaib or Omar.
Tlaib and,
yeah, right.
Or are you going to spread them all over the place so there's cells all over? And then, by the way, are you going to tell the FBI you can't surveil these folks? They're new here. They are protected. You just need to back off and leave them alone. I'm sorry. This is a disaster. This, frankly, could be worse for national security than the last 3.5 years of Biden policy on the southwest border. And that's saying something, because that is a complete disaster. This, if what Biden is intimating, if that goes into effect, it will be far worse from a national security standpoint.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. He's now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen Bucci, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure. I'll talk to you next week.
Yep, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hi, this is Rhett Rasmussen of BestHotGrill.com. Gift giving occurs year-round, whether for birthdays, holidays, or a special expression of thanks to your best clients and customers. Of course, you want to show your love and gratitude, but you also want to give a gift that provides a positive image of you and your organization. Solaire infrared grills from BestHotGrill.com are both practical and unforgettable. Made in the USA, Solaire has a grill for most budgets, but more importantly, Solaire delivers the wow that everybody likes to receive in a gift. Impressive out of the box, and even more so in use, the Solaire infrared grills are the gift of value that will build relationships.